Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving into, well, kind of a universal daydream, aren't we? Real estate. I mean, we've all seen the massive signs on the highway, we've all watched the agents driving around in those really nice cars, and for sure, we've all heard the stories about that one person who bought a few houses and magically retired by 40. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you've probably been doing the math. But here's the problem. The math most people are doing is completely an illusion. It's just wrong. What you see on the outside of the real estate industry has literally almost nothing to do with what the business actually looks like from the inside. So hold on a second. I want you to pause your mental math right there. Just forget about calculating a straight 5% commission on some beautiful $500,000 house and thinking, wow, easy money. Today, we're going to dive straight into the hard, sometimes brutal financial reality. We are going to look at the exact economics of what it really costs to own and operate a real estate business from the ground up. But before we can even talk about the money, we've got to define the business itself. Because real estate isn't just one thing. It's like a giant puzzle made of 7 completely different business models. You've got brokerage, direct property investment, property management, real estate development, wholesaling, house flipping, and rental portfolio investing. And trust me, each of these will destroy your bank account in a completely different way if you go in blind. But since most people who dream of starting a real estate business are actually picturing a brokerage, that's exactly where we're going to focus our lens today. Let's peel back the layers of the classic brokerage model. All right, part 1, where the money goes, the dollar's journey. Okay, let's anchor ourselves with a pretty standard $500,000 American home sale. Following the recent National Association of Realtors settlement, the average total commission sits at right around 5.7%. So, on this $500,000 home, that generates a total commission of $28,500. Sounds absolutely fantastic, right? That's a huge check. Now, here is where it gets wild. Look at how that money instantly splinters. The money doesn't just magically move from the buyer directly to the seller. When that sale closes, a massive chain reaction kicks off. First, the seller's mortgage gets paid off. Then local and state governments take their cut. Stamp duties, land transfer taxes, the whole shebang. Then the professional services step in. You've got title insurance companies charging up to $3,000, closing attorneys taking their $1,500, appraisers taking another $1,000, and then finally that $28,500 commission gets sliced right down the middle between the listing brokerage and the buyer's brokerage. Before anyone even thinks about taking home $1 of profit, a dozen different businesses have already taken a bite of the apple. So, let's actually follow the listing agent's share through what is honestly a painful financial gauntlet. The listing brokerage receives roughly $14,400. If they retain 30%, the agent gets a gross split of $10,080. Still decent, right? But wait, we are just getting started. Look at these deductions. Professional photography and drone production, say goodbye to $1,500. The paid digital advertising that brought the client in to begin with, minus $1,200. Fuel, vehicle wear and tear and licensing, knock off another $550. That leaves you with $6,330. And then the tax man comes knocking for a brutal 30% in self-employment and federal income taxes. Which brings us to this shocking reality, $4,431. On a $500,000 transaction, less than 1% of the home's sale price actually reaches the pockets of the person who just spent maybe 6 months of their life earning it. It's not that agents are underpaid, not at all. It's that the individual transaction model is structurally incredibly thin. Which leads us into part 2, the cash flow death trap, surviving the gap. Listen, if you want to be the brokerage actually taking a cut of these deals, you've got to pay to play. Just to legitimately open your doors, you need licensing fees, which can run up to $3,000. Professional liability insurance, that's another $1,500. A decent, visible office space in a mid-tier city, try $2,000 to $8,000 every single month. Your tech stack, CRMs, websites, accounting software, that often exceeds $10,000 right up front. Add in your first-year marketing, and you are staring down the barrel of a brutal $50,000 to $120,000 in upfront capitalization. And that's before you even buy the office coffee, let alone close a single transaction. But here is what really finishes most new businesses off, the agonizing sales cycle. Let's slow down for a second and really look at this timeline, because it's crucial. Real estate is fiercely competitive. A single click on a Google ad can cost you anywhere from $5 to $15, and honestly, you might need 100 clicks just to get one decent lead. So on day one, you're paying out heavy cash for those ads. Day 90, you are still nurturing that lead, taking them to coffees, showing them houses. Day 180, maybe, just maybe, you get a contract signed, and you might not actually see a commission check hit your bank account until day 360. You're incurring massive monthly expenses from the very first day, but your revenue, it's lagging 6 to 12 months behind. And that right there is why I want you to take this to heart. The vast majority of these businesses fail. And they don't fail because the business model itself is fundamentally broken. No, they fail because they simply run out of cash before that first deal closes. They completely underestimate the massive trust deficit of being a new brand. They bleed cash on customer acquisition, and they fail to survive that dreaded gap. All right, moving on to part 3, the luxury market myth, volume over vanity. We've all seen the reality TV shows, right? So there's this really persistent myth out there that selling multi-million-dollar mansions is the ultimate shortcut to wealth. But take a look at this comparison. Luxury properties regularly just sit on the market for over 150 days. Meanwhile, they are bleeding money the whole time. Professional landscaping, climate control for a massive empty house, security, staging, and marketing budgets that can easily top $25,000. And the buyers? Extremely fickle. They pause their search the second global markets even twitch. Now, compare that to mid-market homes. In active cities, these turn over in just 53 days. Why? Because they're driven by life events, growing families, job relocations, divorces, things that literally don't wait for perfect economic conditions. In this business, consistent volume almost always beats the vanity of a massive headline commission. Let's look at part 4, hidden risks and tech, navigating disruption. Real estate completely relies on borrowed money, which makes it highly vulnerable to structural risks that just arrive totally without warning. Consider the devastating impact of an interest rate shock. When rates jump from 3% to 7%, the monthly payment on the exact same $400,000 mortgage skyrockets from $1,686 to $2,661. That is nearly $1,000 more a month. Millions of buyers get priced out overnight, transaction volumes freeze solid, and margins compress so hard that house flipping returns recently hit a 17-year low of 25.5%. You don't control these elements at all, but they completely dictate your bottom line. And then, of course, there's the technological disruption. By 2025, 58% of property management companies had adopted AI, and a staggering 88% of institutions were piloting generative AI systems. Smart building sensors are out there generating maintenance orders automatically. Machine learning algorithms are building hyper-precise pricing models. The tedious, manual labor of real estate is quietly being eliminated across the board. Modern brokerages absolutely must adapt to these tools to reduce overhead, or they seriously risk becoming totally obsolete. Finally, part 5, how to build an empire from selling time to selling systems. The most profitable players in this game, they eventually figure out one core truth. They stop selling time and they start selling systems. Because if you rely on individual transactions, there is a hard structural ceiling to your scale, and burnout is incredibly high. But look at industry giants like Keller Williams and CBRE. They scaled by franchising their systems, collecting recurring monthly fees from 169,000 global agents, regardless of who actually closed a deal that month. Or they build massive property management arms, charging 8 to 12% of gross monthly rents. That is defensive, predictable, recurring income that arrives every single month, completely independent of the ups and downs of the sales market. They use the transaction treadmill to fund a massive ecosystem. So, I want to leave you with this provocative question to chew on. Are you just building a business to sell houses, or are you mastering these economics to fund your own asset empire? Because the absolute biggest fortunes in this industry aren't built by selling one expensive property. No way. They're built by understanding the real math, surviving the cash flow gap, building recurring revenue streams, and eventually moving from just selling properties to directly owning them. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer on real estate economics. It's been a blast, and I'll see you next time.